I have a 3.5 cubic foot dryer that I got about 6 years ago or so, and recently it started making some rattling noise. So I'm going to investigate this. So now I'm just taking it down, setting it into position to work. And the first thing I'm going to do is take these two T15 screws off with this hex screwdriver. Next, I'm going to take this back cover off. You also may have to take this vent off. I have this longer bit to take off the wall hanging brackets. I'm going to leave this one screw on the top and take that off last so it doesn't fall. Then I'm just going to give the inside as well as the back cover a quick vacuum. Then I'm just going to take the old belt off, which comes off pretty easily, put it through this gap in the support beam, up and out of the way, and then I'm going to take this sponge material that prevents belt rattling off because it's pretty much worn away. Putting some paper towels down, and then just getting an old paint scraper and taking this material off. Any of these portable dryers, it's almost always worn away, which adds to belt rattling. Just removing the old material, put a new paper towel down, and then just putting another paper towel and taping it up just to prevent any of the liquid I'm about to put on it from dripping into the dryer. Then I'm going to put some Go-Gone on it, waiting about 30 minutes or so. Then I'm just taking my razor and scraping off the remainder of the adhesive. Then I have a little bit here. I'm just gonna take that out with the paint scraper. Removing all the junk, putting up a paper towel for protection, and then just wiping it down with some cleaner. And now I just want to pop the old belt on just to take a look at why it is making so much noise. And it seems to have way too much stretch and play in it. So plugging the dryer in and then going to turn it on. It is just banging all over the drum, making a lot of noise. I just want to compare this belt with the new one. So instead of just cutting it off, which is what I would do in most cases, I'm actually going to remove the belt so I can compare it to the new one. And I'm examining it here and actually see that there is a tear. So this belt was not far from totally coming right off. So we're replacing it right on time. So I went on to Amazon and ordered another belt, and I chose to get a belt from a different vendor just to see what the difference is and if I'd have any better luck with this one. And it is pretty highly rated at a 4.8. And now I'm just picking it up with the old belt, and it is much stiffer and doesn't stretch as much as the old belt, but overall looks pretty similar. First, you need to remove any twist ties on the bottom. And if you have the 3.5 dryer, just unplugging the gray wire from the circuit board. You probably have twist ties or plastic ties on the top, so you would remove those, or you could remove the vent like I did, which would consist of taking off these two screws. Then you would remove the 4 screws in the drum, 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top. I'm going to loosen these 3 screws about halfway, just so the drum doesn't fall out. Remove the 3 screws from the support beam. So to install the new belt, you just loop it over the support beam, bring it down, and then in my case, I'm looping the vent through if you took it off. We're just the opposite of a pinch where you push in the opposite way with your thumb and your fingers to create space, so you can loop it down where those screws go in. And then I'm just putting the top screws in about halfway just so the drum doesn't fall out. And then I'm going to totally remove the bottom screws here manually with a screwdriver, so I'm less likely to strip the screws. Looping my wire through, putting it to the side, out of the way. Then I'm going to loop it through the bottom of the support beam. And then do the same thing here, sort of opposite of a pinch, pulling the belt through. And then I'm just going to put my 2 screws to the vent back in, put my wire through and reconnecting it to the circuit board, lining up the bottom, putting those screws back in and fully tightening them, fully tightening the top 3. And then I'm just using my thumb here to line up the drum screws and gonna put those 2 in the top. Lining up the bottom ones and putting those 2 screws in as well. And again, don't want to strip them, so I'm not using the electrical drill here. And then just gonna put these twist ties on. And in my case, I have 2 of them. Bend them back out of the way. And then we just put the belt on, snapping it right in. Now we're going to test it by plugging it in and turning it on. And there is a lot less bouncing around of the belt. It's nice and tight. And then just to prevent some future rattling, I got some felt with adhesive so I could just stick that on and replace the old padding that wore away. And just opening that up and investigating it, and it's nice and sticky. I'm just gonna cut a real small piece. I don't want to put a lot of this on at this stage. So I'm basically just putting this small little piece here, which is the most vulnerable place for it to hit once it sort of gets a little bit more play in it. I would assume maybe after a year or so, I'll probably have to put a little bit more on. But for now, I'm going to leave it as it is. Now I'm just popping the back cover on with the power drill. You could use a screwdriver as well. And then using the hex screwdriver to put on the 2 T15 screws. And then putting my hooks back on. Wrapping up the wire, getting that out of the way. And the exercise for the day with the lift. And now I'm just gonna go on and get some exhaust filters. These are really handy to have, and the last batch I bought lasted 3 years. You could clean these filters with an old brush, or you could get a dedicated small battery-powered vacuum cleaner. But after a while, I just replaced them. Pop it on the new one, back in, then replacing the air intake filter. Don't have to replace very often. Got a nice new one, putting that in, and then just snapping that one back into place, plugging it in, putting some plastic ties on there, trimming off the excess, testing the clearance, we're good to go there, putting the exhaust vent on, out the window, turning it on. Rattling has been eliminated. I was also curious on how much electricity this dryer used. So I went on Amazon and got a watt power meter for about $12. And when you first turn it on, it actually spikes to over 1500 watts. But then it comes down and settles at about 950 watts. And that's where it pretty much stays on the normal heating cycle. The sensor button runs with the heat on for 2 hours, then turns the heater element off when the humidity gets low enough. Turning the echo on, which runs cool for a couple of hours, then the heat turns on. And that goes down pretty quickly. It seems to read for me anywhere between 165 and 145 watts. And that's true of the last 20 minutes of a regular cycle, or if you just turn it to air dry. So basically it uses 950 watts with the heat on and 145 watts with the heat off. And then to test the amps, because I have this plugged into a 20 amp, it spikes up to over 13 amps. So that uses more than half the circuit, and then it seems to settle down to around 8 amps or so. So with the heat off, it's just using a little bit over an amp. Here in California, running that dryer for about 8 hours will run about $2 or $3. And running it with the heat off for 8 hours here in California costs under 50 cents. These portable dryers are great, especially for apartments, but they do require some maintenance, especially changing the blower belt every couple of years.